Welcome again to Corona Chronicles. I guess, imagine this, because this is the story we're going to see in a minute. Imagine you have a 12-year-old daughter who's seriously ill. You dial 999 and the ambulance is coming. You hear it coming up the road and your heart is thinking, oh great, these paramedics will be able to do something. And then it stops and it helps an older lady that's had a problem for 12 years, the same age as your daughter, and they help her out. And then your daughter dies. What would you think? Well, we're in one of these Mark's sandwiches where he has one story in the middle of another story, and it's like the layers of a sandwich. You have the bread, which is one story, and then this middle story in the middle, like the meat in the sandwich. But we're going to look at the outer layers.
Yep, so I'm going to be reading from Mark chapter 5, verse 21, the first part of this sandwich. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered round him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her, so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. And then second piece of bread from verse 36. Verse 35. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this, and told them to give her something to eat.
So you've got this scenario, Jesus come over in the boat, great crowds again, all crowding him, and then this synagogue leader, which is quite interesting because many of the leaders have been very much against Jesus, haven't they? And we know from chapter 3, verse 6, that the great leaders from Jerusalem already want to kill him. And he's got a massive problem. His darling daughter is dying. And he knows, doesn't he? He clearly knows there's only really one hope.
Yeah.
And the one hope is Jesus.
Yeah.
But he delays, and she dies. Well, what's that about? So was he just lazy, or what's going on with it?
Yeah.
Or is he sort of like a chilled out hippie that we see him? He's got plenty of time, all the time in the world.
Yeah. Well, Jesus clearly knows what's going on, doesn't he? Because he hears that she's dead. And this is in verse 36, and this is not a surprise to him.
Yeah.
In fact, he knows.
Yeah.
He says, "Don't be afraid, just believe."
Yeah.
So it's not, he's not, "Oh, what have I done? I've made a huge mistake. I should never have stopped for this woman." It's all...
Should have got a faster donkey or something.
Yeah.
Or sped up a bit. Why did I stop for that old lady?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is clearly in his plan, isn't it? He knows what's going on.
Yeah. Because she has died. Even though it says there in verse 39, he goes on and says, "Why all this wailing and stuff? The child is not dead but asleep." But they laugh.
Yeah.
So he's not actually saying she's asleep, is she? Physically asleep.
Yeah.
She is definitely dead.
Yes. But that's why he puts them all out, because and he says to her, he wouldn't say, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." It reminds me when he says to the paralyzed man, he says, "I say to you, get up, take your mat and go home." There's power in his words. You don't need Jesus' power to wake you up if you're asleep, but here
he treats sleep. He treats death like sleep.
Yes, to him, because he's the author of life.
I mean, I always think it's interesting because she's nearly a teenager.
Yeah.
But it's hard waking a teenager up from sleep, and I think it's harder for me as a parent trying to wake up when my kids were teenagers. It's harder for me to try to wake up teenagers from sleep than it is for Jesus to wake someone up from death. That's the amazing thing about Jesus.
Because Jesus says one thing and they get up.
One thing
you
and
have
they
to
get
shake
up.
the teenager.
Yeah, come, little girl, come.
Yeah,
and it's a lovely thing, isn't it? Even in that Aramaic language, you know, Talitha cum, whoever, I'm sure you say it much nicer than that. But there's a beautifulness about it, isn't there?
Yeah.
You know, little girl, I say to you, get up.
Yeah.
Get up.
It's very gentle, isn't it, from Jesus? He's not sort of rebuking death, but he's calling. It's interesting. He's calling the girl.
Yeah.
He's speaking to her, but it's very affectionate and caring, isn't it?
Yeah.
Little girl.
I think the other thing that just stands out a bit is, you know, I've said this at funerals that you know they're laughing at a funeral.
Yes.
And they're laughing at Jesus.
Because they don't believe in
because they don't really believe in what he's saying, that he can treat death like sleep.
Yeah.
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 And I think the other thing, just to sort of, you know, in the New Testament, you see for those who are Christians that death is like sleep.
Yeah.
But it talks about the saints who have fallen asleep, the Christians that have fallen asleep.
Yes.
Not have died; they've just fallen asleep.
Yeah.
And in one sense, sleep is a practice, isn't it, for death? You know, you go to sleep and wake up. There's a new day. And in a sense, that's how Jesus treats death. We die and we wake up in the in the resurrection and the new life and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's the power of Jesus.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the confidence we can have at a Christian funeral. Because God can see all of eternity. So he sees the day, the night, and then the day again. So for him, there's no panic at all, is there? I mean, Jesus does weep when he sees Lazarus because his death is a horrible thing, but he sees the other side. So there's no sort of panicking, and I suppose that's the confidence we have as well. That you know, they will wake again. Yeah,
absolutely. And the leaders and even the synagogue and the religious people really, in the face of death, you know, what can we do other than wail and cry?
Yeah.
But that's the great hope, isn't it? That Jesus is the resurrection.
Yes.
And you've just been to a funeral, haven't you? And those words are amazing, aren't they?
They are amazing, yeah.
And it would have been great, wouldn't it, if the minister at the funeral you were at had taken these verses and expounded them and given a bit of hope.
Yeah, particularly because there was a bloke I spoke to there who believed in Jesus but didn't believe in the resurrection.
Wow.
Not a member of the church, just part of the family.
Yeah.
And I kind of actually wish I'd taken him to this and said, well, look, Jesus
is the resurrection. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's this beautiful scene. Immediately the girl stands up and began to walk around, and she was 12 years old, which reminds us of the other story we're going to look at next time.
Yeah.
And they were completely astonished with this.
Yeah. And the amazing detail that they're also astonished. They forget that she's a little girl that must be hungry. When was the last time she ate?
Yeah.
It's just a really sweet detail, isn't it? Jesus is saying, come on, get us something to eat.
Get us something to eat. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Well, that's the Jesus that we believe in. That's the Jesus of the Bible, and the Jesus is alive today. That he comes in to our lives and can change death to life. He is the resurrection and the life. See you next time.